a terror more profound than a red-hot blade pressing against your throat. It was the colossal shadow of floating islands blotting out the horizon. In 1405, people in peaceful coastal villages across the Indian Ocean couldn't believe their eyes. From one end of the horizon to the other, a massive fleet was approaching as if the ocean itself were shifting. A single sail was as large as a football field, and a single ship carried thousands of armed soldiers. Was this an invading army of war or an embassy carrying divine blessings? Imagine this: you are out in a small boat, catching fish, and suddenly, hundreds of wooden ships as tall as five-story buildings pass by. On their decks, exotic beasts like lions and giraffes, creatures you've never even dreamed of, are roaring, while heavily armed soldiers look down at you with cold, indifferent eyes. Today's story is a vivid record of the 28 years during which Zheng, his treasure fleet, the most magnificent yet brutal maritime empire in history, stained the world's oceans with blood and spices. The peaceful explorer we thought we knew was, in reality, a lord of mass slaughter and overwhelming terror. Just how much blood and how many screams are submerged beneath those glittering treasure ships? Zheng He's fleet was not merely a collection of vessels. It was a floating city, a mobile fortress. The flagship, the treasure ship, was over 120 meters long. Considering Christopher Columbus's Santa Maria was barely 20 meters, the difference was greater than that between a whale and a shrimp. But the true horror lay in the firepower radiating from those massive hulls. The gunpowder technology perfected since the Song Dynasty reached its zenith with Zheng He. Massive cannons were stationed on all sides, and the fierce fire oil flamethrowers stood ready to turn the sea into an inferno in an instant. If you were the king of a small realm resisting this fleet, what would you decide in front of this forest of wood and iron? Would you kneel and kowtow, or would you be reduced to a handful of ash scattered into the waves? Zheng He's fleet was not merciful. What happened on the island of Java in 1407 revealed their true brutality. When some of Zheng He's men were killed after being caught in a local civil war, Zheng He drew his sword of vengeance without hesitation. Heavily armed soldiers poured out of the giant ships and laid waste to the villages. According to records, they tied locals, who begged for mercy with ropes, and threw them alive into the sea. Thousands of people sinking into the depths, gasping out their final bubbles of air, while the massive keels of the treasure ships glided slowly over them. The sea was instantly covered in corpses, and schools of sharks swarmed the area, drawn by the scent of blood. This is the true face of the Embassy of Peace we were taught about in textbooks. Do you still think of them as mere explorers? Let me tell you a chilling fact you likely didn't know. Within Zheng He's fleet, there was a specialized unit called the Fire Monkeys. When attacking enemy fortresses, they would strap gunpowder to live. Monkeys set them on fire and hurl them into the enemy's walls. As the monkeys, driven mad by the heat, shrieked and leaped across thatched roofs, the fortresses were instantly engulfed in flames. A battlefield filled with the smell of burning fur, the screams of humans, and the eerie cries of monkeys. It is said Zheng He watched those flames while calmly sipping tea. If you encountered a flaming monkey inside your own home, could you think of it as anything other than a curse from a demon? But the reason the fleet was truly terrifying was its treasure. They captured rare animals like giraffes, lions, and zebras from Africa and Southeast Asia. During this process, countless beasts and the locals who tended them rotted away in the damp, dark holds of the ships. The roar of lions trapped in cramped cages echoed through the fleet every night, and the stench of animal waste mixed with rotting fodder turned the treasure ships into floating hells. To transport a giraffe for the Ming Emperor, dozens of slaves had to stand like pillars 24 hours a day to ensure the giraffe's long neck didn't snap. If a slave nodded off and the giraffe's neck wobbled, they were immediately lashed. The bodies of slaves who died were tossed into the sea under the cover of night. Behind the majesty of those exotic animals lay a floor of rotting corpses. Now, shall I give you a twist? The commander of this mighty maritime empire, Zheng, was actually a eunuch. He was a former slave who had been captured by the Ming army as a child and castrated. To a man who lost his manhood and climbed the ladder through blood-soaked power struggles, mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford. Perhaps he sought to compensate for his lost masculinity. Through conquest, destruction, and overwhelming scale, were those massive sails perhaps a giant curtain, intended to hide his mangled pride? Zheng He's fleet was also the Grim Reaper for pirates. When capturing the notorious pirate king Chen Zuyi near Sri Lanka, Zheng He used his cannons to blow the pirate ships to splinters. As the pirates tried to escape their burning vessels, his soldiers threw sharpened harpoons at them. The sound of iron piercing flesh and lodging into bone, and the sight of dark blood being washed away by the salt water. Once captured, Chen Zuyi was taken to the Ming capital and executed by Lingqi death, by 1,000 cuts in front of tens of thousands of people. What did he think as his flesh was sliced away piece by piece? And what was Zheng He thinking as he watched? But isn't it strange? Why did such an overwhelming fleet suddenly vanish from history? Here lies the most absurd conclusion in human history. As soon as Zheng He died, the Ming government burned the entire fleet themselves. Their reason? Overseas expeditions are a waste of money. When thousands of treasure ships were set ablaze in the harbors, the flames lit up the night sky like broad daylight. 100 years before the West began the Age of Discovery, China had the key to global dominance in its hands and threw it into the ocean. If the Ming hadn't stopped, then the global language today might have been Chinese instead of English. Do you think this decision was the wisdom of the Ming, or a foolishness that castrated their own civilization? Now I ask you a provocative question. Was Zheng He's fleet a bridge of civilization connecting the world, or was it a symbol of massive violence, filled with fire and the stench of rotting corpses? Standing on those giant ships, built from the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers and slaves, would you feel the majesty of the emperor or the misery of humans used and discarded like consumables? After Zheng He's fleet vanished, the sea seemed peaceful again, but the memories of terror were etched into every corner of the Indian Ocean. The slaves with broken necks for the sake of a giraffe, the screams of flaming monkeys, and the massacres that turned the entire sea red. We often call Zheng He the Chinese Columbus, but perhaps he was a far more brutal and gargantuan destroyer than Columbus ever was. The treasure fleet we looked at today was not a fleet of gold and jewels. It was a monster birthed from the madness of a suppressed man and the lust of an empire. In the shadow of those giant sails approaching from the horizon, what truth did you see? What are your thoughts on this bone-chilling maritime empire? If you were a pirate in that era, would you fight to the end against Zheng He's fleet, or would you abandon ship and dive into the sea? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement is the power that drives us to uncover the next dark chapter of history. If you don't subscribe and like the giant treasure ships of Zheng, he might appear on the horizon outside your window tonight. I'm joking, but history often approaches as a very real terror. Next time, we will uncover the even more brutal and petty history of the Western warships that moved into the vacuum left by Zheng He. I hope the groans of the slaves who guarded the giraffes don't haunt your commute tonight. Thank you for watching.